The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead. We provide programs and services designed to assist and support the older town residents who wish to remain in their homes as they age. If we don't currently provide a service, we will try and connect you to that service. Call 311 or 869-6311 to get more information or receive services.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Project Independence and You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, your host today, along with co-host Otto Lohse. Good morning, Otto. How are you?
Rebecca. It's a beautiful day. It's a little warm out, but it's beautiful.
It is definitely warm, and it's going to get a lot warmer this afternoon for sure. So
Yes.
we also have the wonderful Kristina Liu, who is, of course, a radio show producer and also the director of Senior Citizen Affairs for the Town of North Hempstead's Department of Services for the Aging Project Independence. So Kristina pulls the show together every week, and today we have a great guest. We're really looking forward to speaking with her. It's Dr. Jennifer McKelvey, and she is a PhD, a clinical psychologist over at Northwell Health, and we're going to be speaking with her today all about managing anxiety and stress, and we have a lot of questions for her. So welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, everyone. So I have been with Northwell for just 3 years, and before that I was staff with New York Health and Hospitals Corporation, and then before that with Mount Sinai St. Luke's. So I'm currently the director of 3 different programs. So the Adult Outpatient Psychiatry Department, the Behavioral Health Crisis Clinic, and the Hillside Medical Clinic. So it's quite a broad range of services that we provide.
That's connected with Zucker?
Yes, so we are stationed at Zucker Hillside Hospital, and then under the greater umbrella of Northwell Health.
So are you overseeing mostly outpatient, but Zucker also does have inpatient as well, correct?
Correct. So we have, I always forget how many units we have, but we have over 200 beds, inpatient beds, and then we have a fairly large range of outpatient services. So focusing on child and adolescent mental health, geriatric psychiatry, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, perinatal, and general outpatient as well.
So one of the things I don't want to say we all kind of find confusing is, labeling oneself as somebody who has anxiety, or when is it like diagnosable? When does it get to the point where you become so anxious that maybe you should talk to somebody, and when do you know if it's stress induced or biological? So kind of a little maybe definition or facts about the range and levels of anxiety, and why it happens, and also curious. I'm very curious about this, and it is the hereditary factor of it too.
Okay. So there's a wide range of questions in there, and
right.
I'm happy to try and go through them, and if I get lost, just give me a reminder.
Okay.
So I think things are hereditary to a certain extent, regardless of what it is. So like hair color, eye color, predisposition toward different, cancer, diabetes. And so there is, some heritability with psychiatric disorders, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. If you have a diagnosable psychiatric disorder, it is not set in stone that any of your children will have it as well, because there are so many factors that play into whether or not that predisposition, let's say, actually comes forth as a developed disorder, because there are a lot of things that tie into resilience or other vulnerabilities that can affect whether that disorder manifests. So almost anything is heritable, but again, there's no guarantee that it's actually going to become an issue later. And so I think anxiety specifically is adaptive to a certain extent. So if you think of an alarm system, right? The alarm system is set there to protect you from environmental dangers, whether it's carbon monoxide poisoning or fire, smoke situation. And so if you've ever had one of those fire alarms or monoxide detectors that's set a little bit too sensitive, and like every time you look at it, it goes off, that in effect is what becomes an anxiety disorder. So that system that alerts you to threats in your environment starts perceiving things that are not threats as threat, right? Because of past associations, it might be trauma, it can be a lot of things, but it's your internal system to try and protect you from psychological, emotional, physical harm that then has become a little too sensitive. So the goal of managing anxiety is not to necessarily make it all go away forever. It's to dial it back so that your alarm system is not as sensitive as it was. And there are a range of different treatments that address those things. And so moving on toward what constitutes a disorder versus what might be everyday stress and anxiety. And it's all on a continuum. So what I might think of as being more of a disorder, you might not. So I think that's always important to keep in mind. But the way we define it in psychology and psychiatry is the amount of distress that it's causing the person experiencing it. So if your anxiety is making life a horrible burden, absolutely seek help. Or if it's getting in the way of engaging with your loved ones, or going out and living your life, or taking care of yourself, or pursuing activities that you enjoy, then it's probably time to get some assistance. And it doesn't mean you'll be in some form of treatment forever. Usually, especially with anxiety disorders, they tend to be, they can be a bit more manageable. So it's just, if you're seeing a therapist or if you're seeing a psychiatrist or both, it's just maintaining conversations with them and saying, hey, I'm good. Can we try this other route? So maybe I'm not in therapy as often, or, just having that conversation so that everybody is sort of moving in the same direction together.
Dr. McKelvey, if we're using the terms anxiety and stress, my picture of it is that anxiety causes stress, and there are other things that cause stress. Would that be the right way to look at it?
Or reverse.
Well,
Right. So I think we tend to use the terms anxiety and stress as interchangeable almost.
okay.
So I tend to think of anxiety as more along the continuum of fear. Some form of fear that you have. It might be fear of going out. It might be fear of making a phone call. It's those things that cause sort of inner friction because you don't really want to do them and they make you really uncomfortable, right? Or you're concerned that something bad will happen, or, things like that. Because anxiety tends to be a lot of it is future focused, right? And whereas I think of stress as sort of pressure, pressure to do something that isn't necessarily gotten into the realm of fear or anxiety. So stress is, dealing with our day to day and, making sure that we're navigating our world so that we don't get infected, with COVID or with, any of those things. So they're a little bit different, stress and anxiety, but I think they're really often hand in hand with each other.
I see a lot of anxiety within my own family with um, people who are younger, and they're in the age bracket of like mid-teens to 21 or somewhere in that range, 22. And a lot of the anxiety when I talk to these, frankly, family members revolves around what you just said, the future and fear of not knowing what their future will be. They don't know what kind of work they're going to do, and they start getting like very wrapped up in that, and it becomes like a fear, frankly. Um, and that's younger people, not older people, but older people have different anxieties.
Right. It tends to be different. And I think it's very much phase of life related. So I think a certain amount of anxiety, depending on where you are in your life, is really normal. And some, a certain level of anxiety can be motivating for you to, experiment and find out what you want to do with life because you're afraid of not finding that meaning. Or, whether you feel like you're supposed to have a purpose or, a job that's meaningful, whatever that is. And then later on in life, it's more about, closure and sort of figuring out where you have been, what you still want to contribute. And then, if like maintaining family relationships is important, like reasserting those or reconnecting, and things like that. So I think it's really it can be really adaptive. It's just, again, if it gets in your way or it's causing you really horrible distress.
I like a lot of what you're saying and, just getting a little more of a clear description. I think some people have anxiety and don't really even know that they're having it or the reasons that they may have it are kind of odd. A little personal issue I had recently and is when my son was away at school and my older son moved out and I'm a single mother. And all of a sudden, all these years of everything I've done for them, whether it's shopping or making sure, their FAFSA forms are done. I mean, you name it, when you have the kids and, it's just every moment I had in my life was kind of just knowing where they were, a little bit of micromanaging, and then all of a sudden, the house is completely empty. And I have all this spare time. And I'm like, I didn't know what to worry about. So even though you have these, and I like what you were saying, in these new phases of life, whether it be, you're retiring and you're moving to a beautiful place, even these kind of positive things can bring on, wow, there's like, I have to kind of redefine myself. But on the good side, they're both back home now. So, I'm back to, but now I know what to prepare for. So a lot of it is, kind of preparing because I wasn't prepared for that time, with all this extra time and, and some extra money too, which was kind of a little weird, So I really would, and I think I was having anxiety about it because, I'm a mother, I'm, all these things. And when they weren't there, I was like, well, like Otto, I was like, what do I do now? And I had a hard time adjusting. So we have a lot of information of programs that you've done on, just ways to cope and understand actually, what's happening. And I love the word managing. Like managing is so much better than saying try to control. So many people jump to that word control all the time. I need to control this. I have to control my anxiety. I have to control this stress. But really, the only thing we can control is ourselves. We can't control other people or environments or scenarios, but we can certainly manage everything as best for ourselves. So, it's important when you first maybe start to recognize that maybe you have anxiety and kind of how do you, what are some of the tools that people can do maybe first to identify, and if maybe they don't need to talk to somebody, but what are the things we can do to kind of self-manage when we start feeling that stress that may lead to anxiety or vice versa?
I think you bring up an important point with the issue of control. So one of the more meaningful exercises I've encountered in being a psychologist is, telling somebody, okay, so if we accept that as true, that we can control how we feel, go up to the next person you see on the street and fall in love with them, right? And tell me how that goes, because often we cannot control exactly how we feel. We can manage it, and we can manage the behavior that may or may not be associated with it. So a lot of us, I think, have a tendency to, when we feel something we perceive as negative, right? So anxiety, depression, our tendency is to freeze and wait for it to go away. And often that it should be just the exact opposite of that you are active in response to whatever the anxiety or depression might be, that you have an active response. So there are a lot of different things that you can do to manage your anxiety. So
we actually have to take a quick break. I'm sorry, then we'll get right back to talking about managing anxiety. You're listening to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio, and we're speaking with Dr. McKelvey, who is a clinical psychologist from Northwell Health, and we'll be right back.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
And welcome back to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. Today's show, of course, is a really good one. We are speaking with Dr. Jennifer McKelvey, who is a clinical psychologist from Northwell Health, and we're just kind of learning, all about anxiety and stress. And before the break, we were really getting into the whole control versus manage, and and I know you were bringing up a very important point before we had a break. So let's just get right back to it.
All right. So I think one of the main things that I found that is helpful in managing anxiety and stress is mindfulness. And I know it's a very large topic, and there are lots of different thoughts about how it should be done. But there's no one way for it to be done. It can be done in whatever way suits your life. So I tend to be very practical when I think of interventions. So there are some people who say, oh, well, you need to spend a half an hour every day meditating. Right. So you have children, you have family, you have work, you have, volunteer work. Who has that kind of time? I don't, obviously. So I tend to think of mindfulness as being more in the moment. So you are in the grocery store, right? You are standing in line waiting to, step up to the checkout counter. You might be getting really angry because it's taking a long time or the machine in front of you keeps breaking down. So you take a moment to stand there and just experience being where you are. So you can start with your feet. How do your feet feel? Check in with your feet, wiggle your toes. Um, Notice the temperature, because grocery stores are always freezing. So you might notice, goosebumps on your arms, your legs, because if it's summer, you came in, you're wearing shorts, you've got goosebumps all over, right? You might, like sometimes my air conditioner doesn't work well, so parts of me are hot and parts of me are cold. That might be you in the grocery store as well. You have a cart or a hand, basket, noticing the smells. And before you know it, that anger is kind of gone because you've taken a moment to just be and not think about, oh, well, I have to get here to go there and make dinner and what's going on. And you just kind of checked in with yourself. And to me, that's everyday mindfulness. You can do it in the grocery store. You can do it washing your hands. You can do it washing the dishes, taking the shower, playing with, children in your family. Whatever it is, it's taking that moment to just be. And it can be 10 seconds, it can be a minute. If you're one of those folks that can manage to meditate for a half an hour a day, more power to you. I've never been able to manage that. But I think it's the perfect opportunity to give your body a chance to relax. And when we talk about managing stress and anxiety, it's really a lot of it is that physiological response. Because in that respect, stress and anxiety physiologically tend to be fairly similar. So really your body is preparing to either freeze, fight, or run away for dear life, right? So there's cortisol and there's adrenaline and there's all this stuff going on. And in short bursts, great. You get to run away from the bear that was going to attack you. Over the long term, not so much. So having those moments to sort of retrain your body to do something else and not be on alert all the time is really important.
You brought up something by using the line analogy. You have a choice. You can be on the line and you can fume and fret about the fact that you're on a line. And I look back in my own personal life, and I was in the Navy. I was 19 years old, and everything we did was a line. And I'm not talking about a short line like a supermarket. I'm talking super line. And I remember looking back, and I didn't know the word mindfulness yet, although now I do. And I'm a big believer in what you're talking about. And I remember standing on that line and looking, it was like I could never see the end of the line. And I would say, you know what? I'm not going to be on this line forever. This line will end. And my thing used to be, I'd look behind me and see how we progressed as opposed to going forward. Like were there more people behind me than there were at the beginning? Did I make progress? And I think your point is very true. Like that's an example of everyday stuff that we encounter that you can get all worked up over and get all anxious about, or you can kind of kick back and do what you said and just relax in the moment. What good does it do to get all worked up over it? The line is not going to go any faster. It's going to, as a matter of fact, it'll take longer up here because you're you're all worked up over it. So anyhow, I'm agree with you on your analogy of the line. I think it's excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other one is that, my belief is, like you talked about, future focus and fear. I think adapting to change as you get older and you look back in your life, your ability to adapt to change, and I preach this to my grandchildren and my own children, that your ability to adapt to change is very necessary because that's what life is. Nothing stays the same. It always changes. And your phase of life analogy again, this is part of the deal. I mean, you might as well get used to it.
Yeah.
You're not going
Right.
to change it. And I've got one more editorial that I'll use here that I like to use, and they've heard me preach this one about it, the train ride of life. You get on a train when you're born, you have zero control over that first train that you're on. You could have been born in a shack somewhere. You could have looked like who knows who. You have no choice in the matter. So you get on the train, and now you drive along on the train, and your mother and your father hopefully pop up, and maybe some aunts and uncles. And as the train keeps going, some other people get on the train, and then they're on for a little while, and they sit real close to you. Maybe you went to school with them or whatever. And they all of a sudden get off the train on some stop, and maybe they'll get on later on another stop, but maybe they'll never get on your train again. And to me, that's like a picture of this adapting to change thing. That's what you have to do. If somebody gets off your train, they're off the train. Let's go forward and see what goes on next. But anyhow, that's my philosophical editorial.
Sounds like a television show that Kristina and I watch a lot. I'm just going to put it out there. This Is Us had that whole analogy, Otto, about the train, the whole life. And and it kind of ended with like coming to the front of the train. So, your analogy was stolen from you and put into a television show. I just wanted you to know that.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
It'd be good for people who use that thinking.
Right.
It's just
And
one tool, like mindfulness,
And one of the things that Dr. McKelvey said, and that really stands out a lot, and I'm also a yoga teacher, and I teach a lot of restorative kinds of classes and guided meditation, is the mind and the body connection. When you're tense, when something stressful happens, if you just, everybody knows the spot in their body, or maybe multiple, what's going to happen, the neck, it's the lower back, it's everything. So it's like that whole, we're all connected. So, and it's to take the time for yourself. How do you become mindful? And why do you want to be mindful? You want to take care of yourself. That's one of the things, like when someone comes to yoga, I make it very clear, you're here for you. What happens outside of here doesn't matter for this hour. This hour is to nurture you. And we do a lot of mindful breathing, when like taking a deep breath in. Well, what do we do with that nice full breath? And I do this all the time with Kristina too, is what's the other thing we can do when we breathe in and fill the lungs? We can think something positive and fill the body with like a positive energy. You're bringing in the oxygen. Why not? Maybe if you can't think, put a little smile on your face, and it changes. And then on the exhale is when we let it all go. Just soften the body. And, all yoga is very metaphorical. So when we soften the body, when we exhale, that's when we come deeper into a pose. We're not coming deeper when we're breathing in because we're filling up. So it's just to really connect with that the mindfulness is for you, and it's to take care of yourself, in these moments. And, I always think of this scenario, especially when my kids were little, before I really became more familiar with, mindfulness and yoga and breathing, is when they would do something so frustrating or, even funny, but, it wound up being a bad thing. My body would naturally go, and then, we all take that big, deep sigh that almost, happens naturally. And when you become mindful, like you were speaking about, Dr. McKelvey, it kind of starts to happen automatically. You want that process. Well, oh, I'm in a stressful situation. Okay, I know what to do. Let me take a few seconds for myself, take in those mindful breaths, not hold on to it, let it go. And, it's just it's so simple, yet so powerful, because you're taking care of yourself. And I think it's so important for people to, nurture themselves throughout the day too, and not think of everybody else and everything else, and let it go. Okay, this is your show. But anyway, I love that
we do a lot of,
pontificating, not pontificating,
Yeah,
but
right.
yeah, the whole connection, and that's another thing that I think we should talk a little bit about too, is, when we are having anxiety or super stressed, and acknowledge also what it is doing to the body. And, so a lot of people feel like that leads to illness. If you're too stressed out, the doctors always say when you go, are you stressed out? And it's like, it's 2022. Who isn't stressed out? I mean, really, not as bad as 2020, but 2022 is still pretty stressful. So, why do you think doctors always ask you that? Why are you stressed out? Because it seems like even today they even do like questionnaires when you come in to determine if you're depressed. So it's that connection is real now. I mean, and I think it's a great thing that our own doctors are now acknowledging, that if you're coming in and you're having symptoms, it could be because, could be a mental health issue.
Right. And so I trying to balance that, because there are some folks out there who, as soon you say, yeah, I have some issues with anxiety, that any physical symptoms are then attributed to that. So just a cautionary word or two to just, if you're managing your anxiety and you're still having physical symptoms, or not managing your anxiety and having physical symptoms, still go to your doctor and push that, because it's very important to make sure that there's nothing physical that's going on that can be addressed through sort of traditional medicine. And to not just say, oh, well, it's just because I'm anxious, to make sure to get all of that cleared up and ruled out first. But I think doctors are more concerned now than they have been in the past, because the way the world has changed, we have less time for play, less time for leisure, and just seems like, stress and anxiety have snowballed over the last few decades. And so there is an awareness that constant activation of stress or anxiety, because of, the natural things that occur in our bodies that are supposed to be short-term, when they're happening long-term, they can affect your immune system. They can affect, more generally how your body functions. So that's why doctors are asking about that as, a way to be more holistic in the way they're approaching medicine, that it's not just, oh, well, you have an upset stomach, let's give you a pill. It's, you have an upset stomach, let's give you that pill, and let's look at your stress levels and see if there are things that you can do to manage the stress as well.
In my generation, there was a stigma connected to mental health, in my opinion. A lot of people, they wouldn't go for help. You were weak if you went for help, and so on. In your experience with all of the exposure you have, do you see that breaking down quite a bit? That the stigma is not like it used to be, like in my era. It was very strong. I mean, you were weak if you had to go for help.
I think it has begun changing. Definitely not to the extent that I would like. Of course, I don't know what exactly that would look like. But I think, yeah, there is, especially now, sort of at the, I don't even know if we call it the end of the pandemic, or wherever we are in the pandemic. I think there's more acknowledgement that mental health is much more important than maybe some people thought, because as far as I can tell, all of the outpatient services that I've been in contact with are inundated with people. So there are a lot of efforts to just try and keep up with the need. And I think things, and culturally it'll be different as well. Anxiety is a bit more accepted. Depression's a bit more accepted. I think ADHD is fairly well accepted.
Right.
Other disorders like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder are not, I think, in part just because of mass media and the way things tend to be depicted. So I think it's a work in progress.
Well, we actually have to take another quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. McKelvey from Northwell Health. She's a clinical psychologist. You're listening to Project Independence in You on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org, and we will be right back.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
And welcome back to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto, Lohse, and Kristina Lu, our radio show producer. And we're speaking with Dr. Jennifer McKelvey. And first, I want to thank you so much for taking an hour out of your time. Your description of what you do, I can only imagine how penciling in an hour, but it's been so informative, and it's going to be, so helpful for our listeners. And I'd love to hear kind of what are things that we can do to kind of, this unhelpful thinking that we, kind of talked a little bit about during the break. What are the things that we can do, and especially for seniors? What are some things that, the older population can kind of work on to kind of combat kind of stress and anxiety that we've been talking about?
Well, I think one thing that you can do is replace the word but with and. If you think about a phrase like, I love you, but I really wish you would take out the trash, right? If you use the word but, it sort of cancels out the first half of it because it makes your love conditional. Right? If you were if you take out the trash, I love you. If you don't, all bets are off.
Right.
So if you replace that with and, I love you, and I really wish you would take out the trash, you can have both. Right? You can encompass more than one thing at a time. You can be anxious and be happy. You can be sad and you can be a little happy. So I think we draw an artificial distinction amongst our feelings that then can almost cause us to spin in circles because we're trying to figure out exactly what's going on because we should only feel one thing.
Right.
And then trying to explain it, and it's not, there is no explanation. So I think replacing those buts with ands can be incredibly helpful. If you tend to be forgetful, which all of us encounter, I say have a pen and paper next to the bed, write in the dark. Don't even turn the light on. scribble, and that can either one, help you remember the next day, or you'd be surprised at how legible your handwriting is, as long as you're not, writing a letter, how legible your writing is the next day, and then you can let it go, right? Especially when you're trying to fall asleep and your mind tends to go in circles. So that type of unhelpful circular thinking that you're afraid that you're going to forget. So you're rehearsing it over and over again. And then another thing is just interrupting it. We tend to get stuck in patterns of thinking. So taking that moment to be mindful is a great thing. Telling somebody a joke and laughing, because laughing is incredibly healthy for our bodies. Take a moment to play with a child, color in a coloring book, take a walk around the block, dance a little bit to music at home. So interrupting that thinking helps you get a little break from it. And then over time you can build on that. So you notice that your mind is starting to spin in circles, and I have this whole list of things that I can do to interrupt that process. Or you can have in one particular brand like therapy method, there's something called a coping card. And so it's like a 3x5 card, and a person writes down different coping skills that they have. So it's all in one place, and you don't have to try and remember it in various circumstances. So you could have something like that in your wallet or in your purse. I know one person I see, they have Post-its all over their room of different skills that they can use, and to just, I'm sitting in my room freaking out, and look, there's a Post-it that says take a deep breath. Okay. So because a lot of the time when we are so anxious and are so stressed, it is really hard to think of those things that could help us feel better, right? So having something like a coping card or Post-its all over the place, even though people might look at you kind of funny for that, doesn't matter. If it helps, that's fine.
I find like people tend to define themselves as the conditions that they have. I'm anxious. I have anxiety. Instead of saying I'm feeling a little anxious right now, or I'm instead of saying, because I feel what happens is when you do that, your loved ones may also do that too. Oh, she's got, a lot of anxiety, or, and then you kind of look at the person differently. And maybe if you kind of, instead of, defining yourself by that way, just saying, I'm feeling anxious, may help you not to tie yourself to that too. It's like, that's how I'm feeling now. And I love the other thing you said, like kind of finding different words, like, and instead of, but. I mean, it really changes so many, like I was thinking in my head, and then because of that, I was thinking, what if you change the word control and used manage instead of saying, I need to control this, I need to manage it. So I think that's a really wonderful kind of technique to use too, and changing like negative words or words that only have one meaning to, these more positive ways of defining.
Two other things you said, taking a note at night and scribbling it. I did that for years. And I also had a thing that I used where you pulled the pen out and a little light would go on and you could scribble on a card. But now what I do is I send myself an email in the middle of the night. I go to the phone. But I agree 1,000%, because once you do that, at least it gets out of here for the while, whatever it is. And the other one is about the little Post-its or whatever. I have in my office the power of attitude. While you're grumbling about something or other, somebody is dying. And all these little positive messages, really. which I think is what you want to try to do. You want to be positive about whatever you can be positive about. Realistically, of course, you don't want to be blindly optimistic, as I like to put it.
Well, I like to think of it as a balance.
Right.
So acknowledging the really messed up things that happen in the world and in our lives, and at the same time, sort of like being angry and happy at the same time. You have both. We all have both. And sometimes it is incredibly difficult to acknowledge that we have both, but we have all the, messed up, horrible things that happen in our lives and in the world. And at the same time, there's beauty, and there's friendship, and there's family, and there are things. And so, sort of relating back to what you were saying about really identifying as a disorder, we can sort of identify as all the bad things in our life, right? Or we can identify as all the good things in our life, and that's sort of the polar opposites of just being really negative and just being really positive, as opposed to all of us are a mixture of things.
That's another word you use there, identification. The way, how do you go about identifying what might be causing you a stress? My personal approach is, if I get an overload, I sit back and I write a lot of stuff down, try to figure out what is the priority at the moment rather than get into overload. But, I think people probably have to have a way to figure out what it is that is causing their stress or their anxiety. They may not know it. Like, what tools are there to do that, to kind of identify what your problems are that you think your problems are?
Well, sometimes if you have the kind of person in your life that will be honest with you, right? Somebody who's not going to sugarcoat, and somebody who's not necessarily on the negative end as well, but who's going to tell you, hey, it looks like this is really the major issue going on, and you trust them, then you take that and you think about it and you decide if that is true. Or, like you were saying, writing things down and maybe rank ordering them, or what friends or family that you trust, or take a poll of people that you trust, as you talk to them, because sometimes just bouncing things off of people is really helpful. So there are different ways that people might do it. It might be stream of consciousness into a voice recording, and then going back and listening to it, and certain things might pop out to you. So it's finding, I think of course there's no one way. So it's experimenting with different things and figuring out what works for you.
I mean, to me, one of the hardest things is I see people sometimes, and myself or anybody included, all of a sudden something really bothers you. But it wasn't that whatever that thing is that was really the trigger. It was like things that happened over time, maybe that were building up. And this is now just the excuse for it to flare up. And the subconscious mind, I guess, is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is it's not easy to figure it out all the time.
That being said, though, Otto, I just wanted to give out a phone number. Kristina got the phone number for Northwell's Adult Behavioral Health Crisis Center, which is also a walk-in clinic too.
So Crisis Center accepts walk-ins from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. But if you do a quick Google search on Zucker Crisis Center, and click on the link in whatever search engine, it will take you to a homepage where you can actually reserve an appointment.
Oh, that's great. And there's also a phone number here. It's a 718 area code. So it's 718-470-8300. And if anybody's listening, certainly you can call us at Project Independence for that number. But again, it's 718-470-8300, or you can, you can definitely go to, the website that Dr. McKelvey was talking about. So one of our favorite topics to talk about on the show is food. So you have information about, eating nutritionally, and, you don't think about, you think about food and eating healthy for your weight, for fitness, but you don't really think about it. At least I haven't until recently, but for your, for stress, to de-stress. And you have things like avoid sugar and that kind of thing. So what is the relationship between some types of food and anxiety and stress? And again, it's not everyone would have that relationship between the food, but what are your findings with those poor people who have anxiety because of sugar, say, something like that? And that must be so hard to determine, because I'm even what Otto was saying, how do you know?
Right. Well, I think it's embedded into our culture, our relationship with food. We call them comfort foods, right? Why do we call them comfort foods? Well, we call them comfort foods because they are heavy and they make us sluggish, and we can't feel as anxious because we're tired, right? Because the food is weighing us down. And so that's why I think we call them comfort foods. And I was thinking about this the other day and realized that most comfort foods are beige. You think about it. We think breads, potatoes, fried foods. They all tend to be sort of cream, off-white, beige, brown. If you're from the South and you like collard greens, and it's a dark green, but it's not there are no vibrant colors, right? So in contrast to that, the foods that are actually going to help us be more resilient to stress and anxiety, among, other things, are the colorful foods. The bright greens, the dark greens, peppers and lettuce and eggplant, and all of the things that maybe we didn't like when we were really young, that we tend to like much more as we move forward in age. All of those things are going to be more beneficial in helping you be more resilient to stress. And if you have sugar issues, because a lot of people do, and you're trying to cut back, berries tend to be fairly well accepted by people's bodies. And if you really need that little injection of sugar and you're okay with dairy products, I usually say a little bit of the whipped cream, like the real whipped cream that you can get, not Cool Whip, and put that on your berries. So that gives you that little bit of sweet, but you're not getting just the pure sugar, but you're also getting the fiber in the berries, so you're not getting that sugar spike. And to start experimenting with that. But as the typical thing, don't make any major changes in your diet without talking to your doctor, because if you have medical issues, you really need to be careful with that. So as long as your doctor gives you approval, starting to make small changes, maybe substitute one piece of fried chicken with, with some red bell peppers, or, something like that, and just making gradual changes. Because I've often found that when we try to make really drastic changes all of a sudden, you do really well for a while, and then, it all goes away.
Right.
You get burnt out. It's not a habit. And when, that happens, you tend to run out of steam.
Well, Dr. McKelvey, we're out of time, and I just want to thank you again so much for joining us today. This is such important information. I don't think anyone listening to this radio show or any of us on this panel don't experience it at some point or know somebody who does. And so much of what you have said has been so helpful. And I'm absolutely sure that Kristina is going to have you back on the radio show. So thank you so much again for joining us. We are grateful. You've been listening to Project Independence and You Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org.